Azad Balabanian. He's a VR developer, 3D artist, and product manager, specializing in VR stereography and hybrid skills. He's currently a senior product manager at Niantic Labs. He's working on Into The Scaniverse, a gaussian splatting UR for database. No, for vision control, right? Database, okay. Previously contributed to the development of pulsing places at realities I know. And he hosted the research VR podcast discussing VR silence movies. As that's passion for aerial photography, as cinematography, as actually studying as taken in from places like Iceland all the way to Armenia, where we create cinematic films and documentaries, historical places. And this welcome Azad and that sorry, one videos also Dan Miller here, and they are going to see there after some presentations. Dan Miller is a staff engineer at Niantic Technology. He most recently has been working on the spatial team, specializing in AR and VR development. He's passionate about programming and game design, and he enjoys prototyping new experiences and new actions enabled by immersive technology. And kind of Rachid is the CEO and founder of Azad Balabanian. It's a technology platform, content studio, and storytelling lab focused on dynamic, non-linear, immersive, and interactive narratives. It previously served as the director of engineering at Google, where he led the award-winning Spotlight stories, Neon platforms, and before his company was acquired by Guerrab Mobility, before Google, he was the president of technology at co-founder of Human Engines, specializing in rapid mindset modified GP. So, please welcome Azad, and we will start with this presentation.
Hi, a little bit. I'm going to, hold it. Probably hear it better. Hi, thank you for having me, Nathalie. Very excited to be here. Coming to a college and to speak to people here. I was very, I know exactly what it felt like to sit in college and to listen to talks about people in industry. And so I was there only 10 years ago. So I'm going to try to kind of give my perspective being in the industry for the last 10 years. Talk about how I kind of got to where I am today by just showing examples of my work, maybe pull out some learnings from that that can maybe apply to today and to the future as well. So who am I? I'm this crazy weird guy with that likes cameras and headsets and weird things. So I studied cognitive science at UC Santa Cruz, and I was really interested in like next generation photography, going both forwards and backwards in technology, including like the stereoscopic things, which goes back like 150 years, which all of us talked about a little bit. And then going forward into photogrammetry and gaussian splatting. Wow. I worked at Upload VR for a bit, Realities.io, where we built gaming using 3D scanning photogrammetry, and now currently at Niantic Labs, where I work on gaussian splatting. So just to brief, I keep saying this word photogrammetry, but what does it mean? This is how a photogrammetry scan is made. This is me scanning my neighborhood in San Francisco with a drone, which is totally legal to do, by the way, because I can read that. San Francisco is a very drone permissive city, thankfully. And so the way 3D scanning works with photogrammetry is to be able to go around, to take pictures of a thing or a place, play the video again from all angles. And so then you feed it into the software, which uses structure from motion algorithms and understands where the pictures were taken, and then from that, this is kind of what it looks like when it aligns all the images, and then from that creates a bone cloud, which then is used into the actual geometry of the same thing that you're being constructed, which is quite accurate actually, down to depending on how how high resolution images are and how far the photos are from the ground. You can have a centimeter level precision. So this is geometry, which then gets simplified to that 170 million down to, I think this was around 100 or 200,000 triangles. And then finally, you can project the colors from the photos, just like a soft air, down to the geometry. Get like a fairly photorealistic looking result. So this is the principles of 3D scanning. So it's something that's been used in the industry for map making for a long time. It's like how Google Earth and Google Maps are kind of created to introduce those. So the cool thing is kind of now I'll kind of go backwards into how I got into this. I was I'm a little research assistant at the Visual Perception Lab under Nicholas Technos, Santa Cruz. The very first time, I think actually a photo of my very first photographic scan. So this is like the humble beginnings of where I took a DSLR and kind of walked around the lab and took pictures and didn't get a great result. But from that, I saw like various things. I was like, oh, the couch is nice. The wall in the back is nice. So it led me to investigate further as to why that was so, and understood that white walls and featureless areas like those white walls don't have much for the images to really extract and understand from. So things like the couch have a ton of features, like that's very distinct from that. I said, okay, that's how photogrammetry works. This led to us having a little hackathon. Got involved with just like beyond development with my lab mates. We built a VR app where it's supposed to be like a studying experience. VR, we can sit in the same location as where you're going to take the test. We just learn about this like environmental memory effect, where if you study the same places where you like take testing, you might actually end up doing better because you can like associate various memories to the environment. So that was the idea at least, but it was good enough that we got that we want at the box. And I also, this was I guess to show examples of like that just kind of pursuing the interest in various ways can lead to various opportunities. So I try to really get involved with like meetups and events that I could meet people and network from. I really wanted to like have a job in industry. I talked to other also research cognitive scientists who just wanted to talk about VR research. So we started a podcast that we did for a number of years that I ended up going to some events and uploaded, keep myself available as a young do-it-all. And I just tried to do a lot of things. But it all kind of led to also me working on these green screen mixed reality video creations. So I also came from a much more creative background. And I wish I knew that going into the world or in university, that there's actually a lot to do with pursuing creative talents. Because kind of growing up, your parents are like, creative things won't get you jobs, but as I actually in the industry, I was like, oh my God, like I wish I did more photo work, video work, music, like all those things. And I wrote because turns out in the technical world, like a lot of people are not good at those things. And there is actually a big market. So ended up doing a lot of films where I have to upload created trailers from VR companies. Also photogrammetry kind of came out of that as well. So that was just kind of an interesting, very early version for me. Like a year out of college, I was like, oh my God, I really wish I did more on the creative side. Combined with technical things, I think it's like a very good combo. I want to also show an example of like photogrammetry being used to create things. This is one of the few examples where it's like a direct one-to-one relationship between scanning something and radiating from it. Most of the time, photogrammetry is used to create assets where you can scan things like this mic stand or table and break it into a game. But it's a complicated procedure, but to be able to scan a location and then use it as the game itself was kind of the idea of puzzling places. So this is what I worked on for the last like 5 or 6 years was a 3D jigsaw puzzling game aimed at 3D scans around the world. So that was in this puzzling places. You can play it on the MetaQuest, PlayStation VR, as well as Pico. It's very fun, awesome game. Something my mom utilizes. But yeah, this was kind of like building upon the technologies that existed at the time and still today. And then this kind of leads to the next generation of 3D scanning, which is wavelength fields, nerves, and gaussian splatting, kind of the latest iteration. So 3D scans look like this for the most part, and the gaussian splats look like this, which is much more realistic looking, much more, it feels like what reality actually is supposed to look like. So this is where AI is, kind of introduced a lot more realism into this, and it's leading to a lot of innovation. A lot of researchers are starting to go, write papers that are improving upon these algorithms. So the neat part is all the data for photogrammetry is perfectly relevant for these next generation algorithms. So all the stuff that I've been scanning for the last 10 years are all very much open here. So this is something to keep your eye on. It's not the end all technology for this. Like every year, we're starting to see a lot more innovation and building upon this. So it's very much evolving field. So if you're interested in photography, just sort of where things will go, this is like a big step in that direction. So building upon that, I joined Niantic recently. Are known for Pokemon Go for the most part, but they have a big other side of the company, which is all about building 3D maps of the world. And so they've adopted Gaussian splatting. We built a game, app for MetaQuest where you can scan things around the world and look at it in VR. So this is me scanning the small traps in a guard. What's on your studio, putting on a headset and looking at it in VR, which is really, really, it feels quite realistic. Scale is correct. That the lighting is, exactly how it was when we captured it. And so it's a free app. It's actually the web experience has been live since December, but the app itself was coming out on Wednesday. So big look out for that. So Into The Scaniverse, and the way you capture things is what the app called Scaniverse. Items. I want to finish with kind of like also some personal work that I've been doing to also help connect the technology to more cultural and heritage things. So I'm Armenian, and I've been interested in Armenian history for a long time. There's an area called Ani, which is a very old medieval capital of Armenia. It's currently in Eastern Turkey, and it's in ruins. It's been in ruins since like a big earthquake in the 1600s, and it hasn't really been preserved for a long time. But it has an architectural marvel of a place. 150 years ago, then a photographer, his name was Augustus Jung, went there and actually took really cool stereo photographs of the place. So he created a set of stereo photocards called, they called Romans of Money as well, and published them. So you can find these, and they're quite beautiful to look at. And when I saw this, of course, I was like, oh my God, I have to go there and do exactly the same. So that was a bucket list item for me to do. And I ended up going there 3 years back. And the main point wasn't to really do is their photos, although I did end up doing a few of them. But more importantly, I wanted to do the next generation of that, which was photogrammetry. So I scanned quite a lot of places in 3D and reconstructed them. I'm in the process of publishing and open sourcing the data as well. It's like a little multiple per each project. So I'm going to end with this, which is actually kind of going back to keywords. after 150 minutes of the same location. They tried to get the angle similarly, but this is also a Gaussian splat of the scene. So it's kind of interesting to see what has changed. Of course, this wall here has like collapsed, but part of the church, this monastery, is very much Islamic. So kind of neat. Last part, AI, right? We're here to talk about AI. I kind of want to say, don't worry about it kind of like taking over everything. I think every generation has its issues, like everyone coming out of college and stay with that. Yeah. My sister, 4 years older than me, she graduated college and audition crisis, had a other kind of, I think the most important thing is to really focus on learning and doing things and thinking things, and probably just using AI as well to really help accelerate your skill set. The important thing is this has never changed, and I think it's even more relevant today is like have a key skill set of like specializing in one thing, but to really also be able to generalize, have a good understanding of quite a lot of other things. So perhaps in this, in my case, it's like having like a very generalized, creative and technical skill setting, specializing in one, and being able to build things by the combination of those skills. And finally, is like to stay humble and just that will reach its never stop learning and be able to stay on top of the technology as that kind of like shifts and the run gets pulled and it needs to done. So yeah, that's me. Thank you all for being on the chat.
Thank you, Sakala. Where we will ask for the questions at the end. We shift the speaker. Okay, so then we learn from Unity.
Well, thanks. So my talk today is called Build a Future Today. So I do need to show this safe harbor statement. This is for educational purposes only. Please do not make purchasing decisions. Also, I want to mention it's kind of my own personal opinions on some of these things and what I've seen here. Yeah, sorry. Great. Was no read it. No, I think it's fine. So as mentioned, I'm Dan. We're using technologies as an engineer. I've been there for a bit. I originally joined on the advocacy team. I was focused on virtual reality, kind of building content, samples, things like that. And then more recently, I was on the polyspatial team, building support for the Apple Vision Pro for Unity. And what I'm going to do today is kind of talk a little bit about Unity, talk about how I've seen the XR industry, how it's always kind of changing and adapting. Some of the early work that we've done to lay some of the groundwork for really where I feel like we are today. I want to talk a lot about kind of this cross-platform opportunity, especially in the mixed reality space. And finally, I'll just talk make some resources if you're kind of getting started or you're an advanced GA developer already. And the big takeaway I want here is to really kind of emphasize that right now, today, with the platforms, with the kind of technology, and with the tools that are available, I think it's a really exciting time. I think we're seeing a lot of things kind of culminate and come together, whether it's what was released recently or what we can see into the future. I'm also hoping this is a little bit informational as well as a little bit inspirational. So at Unity, we believe the world is a better place with more creators. Whether you're getting started as an individual, a small team serving your first VR title, or a large studio developing games for millions of users. And Unity has always really been at the center of the XR industry. We've really kind of led the way for the tooling as well as the platform support. You can see 50% of the titles for the Apple Arcade, the Apple Vision Pro launch for Beta Community, and we top the charts on both the Quest Store as well as CVR. And really, this has been through our kind of close collaboration and partnerships with a lot of the major platform builders and companies. And while if you've been in the gaming industry, you know there's lots of challenges, whether it's less budget, canceled projects, or layoffs. These challenges also kind of pulled over into the XR industry as well. What we're seeing in Unity, I think this is kind of doubly so in the XR space, is that there's lots of opportunities to take those skills and experiences outside of gaming. Whether you're looking at things like industrial, automotive, or medical, there's opportunities for visualization, training, as well as just education and these industries as well. And you've seen a lot of these XR apps and experiences also kind of leverage this wide range outside of gaming. And so I really like this quote, there's nothing permanent except change. When I think about the XR industry and kind of this more modern resurgence of VR, you're seeing a lot of these kind of pushes and changes in really what we're seeing kind of come together. So if you go back in 2013, you look at the successful Kickstarter of the Oculus 2K1. Then in 2016, you have the HTC Vive. This is where we're really getting into room scale experiences, walk around, track controllers. In 2019, you have the Oculus Quest, which is really pushing us toward this standalone platform. I think a lot of people saw the value in the kind of all-in-one, but there's also lots of challenges where you get a lot less compute, a lot less processing power when you're on this kind of mobile chipset. Last year in 2024, we had the Apple Vision Pro, a device that had been kind of rumored and hyped up for a long time. I think there's a lot of excitement in the platform and how we're kind of pushing the industry forward as well. And now we're basically right there. We're in 2025. Things have just happened. We've also already seen a peek into the future. We have things like Android XR that are coming out from Google in partnership with Samsung, building Project Wuhan, new mixed reality device. We've also seen presentation from Meta on their kind of advances in both the kind of smart glasses, display technology, as well as the wearable form factor. And it feels like this is a really exciting time. It feels like we're starting to kind of build upon all of these learnings and where we're kind of moving in the industry. And so at Unity, we saw a lot of these trends and we kind of laid some of the foundation that all level up to where we are today. The same time that kind of chart I was showing previously was happening, we are also seeing advancements on the augmented reality side. So on mobile augmented reality, we have things like ARKit and AR4 for Apple with Google. And those kind of combined to really, enable people with billions of smartphones out there to kind of view and understand their space and put content in it. At Unity, we saw a similarity between these platforms and feature sets. So we built something called AR Foundation. And what this is kind of an abstraction on the data that both Apple and Google provided for mobile augmented reality. It gives you kind of a unified API to target. On the virtual reality side, we built something called XR SDK. This was really a way for both us internally to link into the kind of core systems of Unity and enable these new XR platforms, taking over things like camera control, being able to affect the kind of position and rotation based on the actual device. And this also enables other kind of platform holders to also build on top of Unity and kind of really enable their. And then last but not least is OpenXR. If you're not familiar, OpenXR is kind of maintained and developed by the Kronos Group, probably most famous for things like OpenGL or Vulkan. And Unity is actually a founding member of OpenXR. We've been there from the beginning and developing these cross-platform APIs and these standards for the platform holders to really adopt. So really, what does this look like, or how does this kind of all bubble up? I mentioned things like mobile augmented reality. This is what we had at first. We had AR4 and ARKit. They feed data into AR Foundation, and then we make this kind of high-level abstraction where you as a developer just have to target the AR Planes API, in this case for like service detection. And what's happening recently is that we're seeing a lot more platforms start to bring these features and tools to the head-mounted form factor. So now we have Meta Quest, which also has service detection and play detection, and the Apple Vision Pro. On the Unity side, we're able to filter those up through the same kind of pipe, and you as developer can also just target this AR planes. And if you start to bring in kind of more complexities, things like hand tracking, you also see OpenXR, which has a kind of standardized hand tracking API that can then feed into another high-level package called the XR Hands package. Now, the way that all of these work is that they're really meant to kind of continue to build these platforms into. So Apple Vision Pro also has hand tracking, but it doesn't conform to the OpenXR standards. We can still kind of manipulate the data a little bit, pipe through here into the XR Hands package. And so, now more than ever, you can start to build these experiences that are really cross-platform. They use these high-level APIs to kind of build once and deploy to a variety of platforms and headsets that are available. So what does it really look like? So here is kind of an example. It's just a small app that I put together recently. And what it allows me to do is use those high-level APIs. So here I'm using hand tracking. In this case, I'm putting a little object at the tip of my index finger. And when I touch a physical surface, in this case, the wall of my office, it actually spawns content relative to that kind of track or bound plane. Here I'm just spawning a bunch of spheres and kind of a special algorithm to lay it out there. But what we're enabling, this really was not possible before, is that you can have this mixed reality experience. In this case, I'm marking Android. It goes on the Quest. I'm the Quest for Yes. And on this side, I'm targeting Vision OS, and I'm able to have this the exact same app just work across platforms. And so I think, everyone in the XR industry understands that it's a smaller niche industry, and getting anything in front of your audience is a big win. And, the more platforms you can target, the bigger audience and the bigger reach opportunity you have. And so I feel like it's, really exciting that we're finally seeing the platform start to adopt OpenXR. We're finally starting to see these kind of cross-platform solutions and these devices that are really pushing into the mixed reality space. All right, so what does this all mean, or how is this kind of coming together? And so I mentioned, the different platforms that are out there, whether you're talking about Vision Pro, Oculus Quest, Meta Quest, as well as things like Android XR. It's really this healthy competition, I would say. I think you're seeing a lot of the big players kind of push the industry further, or even get back into the industry. You're seeing, UX paradigms from one platform start to emerge on another, or just similarities there. And from a kind of developer or consumer standpoint, it feels like a really good opportunity. It feels like all the hard work they're doing kind of enabled or pays off. We're also at this point where cross-platform mixed reality specifically, with these new headset, new capabilities, kind of more available or more possible now than ever. And lastly, I think you start to look at kind of the high-level trends in the industry, how you see things like global augmented reality, now input, hand tracking, etc. You're really seeing these things continue to kind of build on top of each other. So the skills and experience, or the things that you're developing and learning today, will still be relevant on these future platforms, whether it's advancements in software, hardware, or additional technology. It feels like a lot of the work, the hard work, and the kind of groundwork that we continue to build today will still be important and enable things in the future. All right, so here's just a handful of resources I'll put together. Unity obviously is heavily invested in the XR industry. We've built up a lot of content here. Some of the things we're building more recently are XR templates. So these are really kind of small self-contained projects that help you get started quickly. We recently released a multi-user tabletop experience that allows multiple people to get around the tabletop, use the kind of interaction and building games there. There's also a lot of package samples. So as I mentioned, things like Air Foundation, XR Hands, those are getting packages, and they have these kind of set of samples that are really kind of bite-sized content for getting started with those APIs. Learn.unity.com is a great resource for things like dedicated learning cycles, as well as things like virtual reality and local augmented reality. There was this mixed reality ebook that went out recently. It talks about everything from enabling pass-through on the Quest to the device capabilities of the Apple Vision Pro. And the last thing I want to mention, this kind of newer thing that the education team put together. This is called Universal Job Profiles. It was developed by kind of talking with a lot of people in the industry, doing a lot of surveys, and really it's kind of like a comprehensive rubric / PDF looking at the kind of jobs and skill sets within the industry. And there's one specifically for VR developers and AR designers. You can just Google Universal Job Profiles Unity, have a free resource here. And it goes through, some tools, technologies, as well as kind of features and things you might want to understand. All right, so I want to end on this quote. The best way to predict the future is to create it. It feels like now an amazing opportunity, and there's really a lot of possibility in mixed reality space. I can't wait to see what you do.
Let me switch the slides and then we'll have our speaker.
Hello. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for finally. So we're in James, and I'll talk to you a little bit about storytelling. That's my passion. And yeah, okay. So okay. So I started games on 4 centuries ago, so a long time ago. And launched my games on you like this later done. And then about 10, 12 years ago, started this interesting project called Solid Stories in the Google, which was basically an interesting mix of game developers who knew nothing about making songs and filmmakers who knew nothing about real time and neon and had a lot of that in stuff. And along which developed an interesting tool set, a platform called Solid Stories, which been shipped on YouTube. Most of you might not know, but I since then I've also started Idol and developed other platforms and feature states for live animation, for team with characters, and script, which I'll talk about later, which is mostly focused on the whole pipeline for making interactive sorts. The main theme over all of these years has been the main storytelling. The only thing getting stuff to focus on fun, as we used to say. Stories were always the main driver, at least for me. For the projects that I worked on, they were always the main thing that kept people going. And they were also the hardest thing to come about. And we were always in that eternal fights in game development between the fun and the story that gets all the velocity, fun and story that is interesting. And so that I took we be when we worked with filmmakers who didn't want to know anything about interaction or whatnot and used to making movies. Some of the people that we worked with and Oscars before worked with Disney and Pixar and some of the big budget Hollywood movies. And the interesting thing with them is that they knew how to tell stories and they knew how to tell the things good. And so when you come in and, it's something 360 or the user interacts, and of course, one of our biggest statement that stated always is, wouldn't it if you or the camera? What? That's my whole lifetime. I do want to direct for the camera. And so throughout that, I don't learn really what it takes to take something that's been 100 years in the making into build language and processes and pipelines and departments and try to reshape it into something that's still storytelling at the heart, but now using all of these interesting technologies that was on how people develop to say you can actually tell stories in way differently, much better and deeper, and still do that craft that you know how to. Right, of course, throughout it, the honest theme is that I just love making tools for artists because I can't draw for shit and there's but I can make codes and they make my code look good next, but you can visualize. So say, especially in the last, 12 years, 13 years or so, like obviously evolved a lot since Natal became the big thing, and we've seen so many developments, especially in interaction technology and this way that what we should at the heart of entertainment in watching games and movies. And a lot of works on where people have tried to experiment with interactive storytelling for it, and they got come around. Obviously, narrative games have been around for a long time, and text games have been around for a long time. And a lot of people have been trying to build interest in making these new technologies and see how to tell stories. But the problem is, for a lot of the projects, especially for people who are coming from traditional filmmaking, is that they all end up being big tech projects. Because you always, it was big lessons for the story of every short film. We did 18 short films in about 6 to 7 years that shaped and made others than didn't. And every one most was from a different studio, different director, different team. And every time you like ship in a new version of the technology. Oh, we need 360, or we built our own 360 camera with someone invented new ways of stitching because there was no stitching back then to make music videos at the level of a Netflix film quality. And to figure out how to use hands and figure out how to use like 6 dolls for moving in space and what does that mean for story that the way. So every time it was a big technological project, we worship in something. And since then, my passion has been how do I turn these tech projects into creative? It's into something just like when editors finally had their editing suite for video and they can just use it as a big play in music and they can stitch things together and play with it over and over until everything's that they don't have to go and call programmer at any time for sake and things like this so couple. Thanks for that. We actually rethink concepts, skills, and trusts because all of the old ways either have been built for someone or have been built for big game teams in order to use something create. And what we started with a very simple idea of concept. We think because we targeted mostly creative people from film, edition writers, a few 100,000 at least in the US, especially the less probably millions in the world. We said, okay, just think of your story that you're making linearly as you do just, one moment to another, typing is fixed, but having these pre-programs to run in a certain way for every possible viewer out there. And the shop exploded down here. I think of it as dynamics, non-linear. Take that moment and then the end maybe or sometime during that one shot, you could go anywhere. Where would you go? What options would you have? What options would you create for different people? Spotlight stories, for example, a lot of the stories were based on one interaction idea, which was where you look. If you are in VR, where you look, it changes what happens in the story. We just got one change, ended up with so many interesting, options and possibilities, and also challenges. Because so how does the story unfold some theater, and how does it go back, and what if they don't see it, what if they don't see it on the right side, and so on and so forth. But when you start thinking about all those things are actually examples that were showing you, whether it's VR, AR, 360, even web-based games that are narrative-based, it's actually the same model overall. It's always you're playing something specific to tell your story, and then you're taking people from one bit to the next, and depending on where they go, where they shoot, you pick something else to show them, and so on and so forth. And in practicing when I worked on the called War series, you can think of it as the moment is actually the cutscene, and interactions you go into one pixel, one level to the next, and then show you another cutscene. The rest, most of them were linear shorts. But changing the concept a bit like this sometimes creates for us, tech people, we think about, okay, well, I can create a format, I can create a model, and from there I can create tools around it, and I can then start building something that people can use. And just with that simple model, there's a whole spectrum of types of stories directed going to have in common. From what I call observing, like you're just there, without just 60 video, you're just there. You still interacting with the local around. But really, it's watching the story. This type of story where you're discovering bit by bit. Once failing, you're putting together your puppeteer character or the one to the adventure page or acting the character around at least in parts of it. Playing a role in the game where it starts getting more interesting, you are a character, and then being the lead. Large simulation games, for example, you are in the play role card, you're playing a role of the leader or some, sorts of characters to build something. And of course, the in theory, it's but again, more you're going towards that out there, the less narrative control. Person who sent Stone House, the more agency they get to their audience. And I think that just a couple of examples where it's in six, some of our public stories, most of them are the skill observing a story. You might observe the story in different ways that we don't need to write, but sometimes it's just practice. I don't know. When it's the gate floor, it's basically you have the sort of the kind of the love story, but you're navigating between different chapters by doing silly things like watching word to meetings or starting to pray meets all at night. But then there's from there's a lot of kind of things games and well sometimes free games that kind of span the whole spectrum all the way out to where you are, as I said, with God of the work that you're playing. And what we also wanted to do is sort of find a happy marriage between this world where you're writing stories and that world where you write code. And all of these projects in Oxford when we were just building the Black Swan, a lot of times the person who had the idea of how the story needs to work has to sit next to the programmer really and tell them, wait, this pipeline, don't want this to happen, I want something else to happen. And this data is coming in place at the right time. I know it's random, but can you randomize it in a non-random way and certain effects? And I've had those in myself. And so we kind of looked at various models of theater actually, and how a lot of times theater is managed. Some of it, like immersive theater, is very dynamic. Some of it is more or less static. We'll try to find some way of having at least the person who's telling the story be at least in control of some level of how it flows, so they can play with it and they can learn what controls they have. But of course, the big challenge in a lot of these projects is that you can't work in a waterfall model that most people are familiar with. There's the writing, the storyboarding, the board animation, that we can learn to actually producing the sets and so on, so on, all the way to let's ship it to the sound guy and music rights they can change. Because the interaction kind of comes in right in the middle of all this. Your music is interactive, your sound is interactive, and what you show, what you show is all very different. And so we had to rethink how we can present people with a tool or the tool space where everyone course their content in a way for like New York. I also see the work that's coming from other places so they can see when while it has really like the correct also things that are available to the person with Google storyboards. Each time the person will spend in their animation with captures.
Okay.
And this is kind of what it looks like on my big screen. But there's a bunch of other programs. And so here, like, there's a bunch of departments here. And actually, a lot of times this shocks people who work in traditional construction because, well, this is the way the department directs the kind of the editing department and so on and so forth. But we want people to be able to, at the same time, if you're comfortable in a graph sort of structure where you want to explain about the components of your story, sort of like if you're doing notes on a big board, you can read there and you can actually create scenes and create logic and solve there without even seeing the script. Then we go back to the script and you have to see the story and go and add the details. And idea like the details, somebody from the sound with the way to pass on the sound on the story, you come in and see, okay, this is where that effect needs to happen, this is where it needs to happen, all in one place, and all being tested in real time as they added stuff. And we have to, add these, so it's in that shaper kind of vocabulary that matches the even fill blank, because that's what's the difficulty. We need to add in words when you're trying to interact and you're trying to say, optionally go there, optionally go there. If something happens, programmers is very familiar with logic, but of course, to somebody who's never seen that, we actually had meetings to explain this 10 logic to award-winning artists. But we had to go through it and just explain what that means. And we need to simplify my language as simple and vocabulary as possible, while still maintaining some level of flexibility so you can create things if you're a game designer who wants a quick look. But what happens is, so it's like that line a little bit, but as people start playing these songs, things get more and more complex, of course. Most the difficulty, some linear to branching is already being looked astronomical to somebody who's never done anything very fast. But once you start working with different aesthetics and start creating all these like different stories and so on, suddenly things get more and more complicated, and people sometimes, especially in one big designer who thinks they're doing system thinking, because you need to create something that's more robust, where not one person can manage the whole set. And in fact, a lot of the most exist in linear storytelling, but we never see them because what we see is the result of a linear sort of editing of the events. But actually, if you look at their boards, it's the same mess. Takes lots of different ways that they need to manage in order to get the story working. But in interactive, we're actually putting in some of that optionality all the way to the user. And all of that, of course, creates complexity. And so what do we do here? This is what I think the next stage, which is what fucking like we are. This is where somewhat AI can help. At some point in the future, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. And a few things that we're looking at, of course, but what this R&D, because this is all still research, is what still ready. Content generation, a lot of people, of course, talking about things. Generative AI is a big subject. But generative AI is a big subject as a fun and research subject. I don't think it's a big subject for people actually doing content yet, except in certain very narrow cases, where you can say, and I'm comfortable generating content from my story. But it does bridge a lot of interesting areas where, let's say, with the complexity, we need so many things generated. And how do you do that is and just explode in terms of budget. I remember looking at the valuation actually with the guys unfamiliar with Ready Slashes, this Netflix social where it's sort of interactive. It's like the old school FMV apps. And we took that whole show and kind of reprogrammed it in our tool just to see what the branching looks like and what they did. And you can clearly tell that they had so many options going on and so many interesting parts in the beginning. And suddenly the story starts getting very, very linear all the way to the end and some loose trash. Because it's really hard to maintain that sort of flex content generation once it gets mature and more controlled, with potentially out bridging the gap where you don't have to think about all the different things you have to learn. I think the most mature area where AI actually is helping a lot in animation and motion sicknesses and caption. Because I think overall, the state people have been working on motion captures for a while now. I'm playing kind of tutorials, including things like reality. So I have another tool on animation, like opportunity to use AI fix to capture people's faces with actors that were distributed all across the country. And they all sort of merged nicely with a synchronized audio and all showing live in front of people. And most of that stuff is working fairly well. There's still with high quality, there's still work video, but that's for me the most enjoyed. Speech decoding, that's as well. It's slightly not in real time yet, so it's getting there. Of course, the new rendering techniques as well. Some people like doing a gaussian splash, those things that gives them something that looks better than they can house. So everyone wants to see recreations are, they're like a realistic look, but that also has other problem you've been seeing them. CTE and lots of other things that we can resolve. And they're really like models for writing and interactive learning. Also, the brand consisting, I'll show you a couple of examples quickly. Now, we have this narrative design system for example, write things simply as, this style online, can you generate 6 random variants of this that fits within the context that does the same thing, but still I can make something that doesn't sound like repetitive over and over. And we can say, split the scene here, depending on whether people looked this way or that way. We'll try to actually take advantage of the natural language parts and the fact that these language models are really good at understanding language, but you have to control them to make sure what's publishing itself well. So quickly, for us, I think the challenges, especially with AI, is that it's unreliable design. So all the students here, good luck. Because that is for me the biggest problem is we creating UX models where what you're getting is not necessarily demandable. Latency, of course, is getting solved slowly, but it's still a work in progress to build something in real time to control, specifically to control what is resource intensive. Of course, it's rapidly evolving, very much keep up. It also be very unreliable in terms of what you get from research because most of the papers very hard to reproduce. Reduce when they did. We have a selection bias because we see all the good results and we never see all the ugly results. And most of them, what's the team success rates of any of these things? And so that leaves us with obvious terms of uncertainty. But I think we've reached a point now where there's enough work out there that we can distill into, there's still interesting applications that I think we're learning now with someone. But just like with beyond, we sometimes get stuck in the tech is really good. And there's so much of it, interacting with it, and we just get on tracking by unreading more than 8 years ago. But we failed sometimes at translating that into an actual creative. Well, okay, I have my interactive. What do I do with it? Okay, let's see somebody. Of course, there's applications with other domains that are moving right. Great. In my way, since storytelling specifically, but we need to do that layer that takes from the type and the basic type, turning into which reliable, what can I expect if I do voice interaction? What's the latency? Give me some examples of how it works. Give me some examples of using a story, and then let me play with it now, and then I know I can miss it. Let's try to like the rest.
Thank you. It's super interesting. I'm going to stop the. I'm just going to ask the first question and then let the questions in the room, because the three talks were like so interesting and showing different trends of the teams that are pulling up for creators. So my question is more towards, you have all been in the industry for like 10 to 25 years. And you see, like, yeah, the tech is evolving all the time. And sometimes it's a nightmare for creators, sometimes it's, a really good thing and it's very inspiring. So what kind of advice would you give to the students, like preparing for this kind of career? What will help us beyond just learning the tools?
No, I always go backwards towards the Lindy effect, meaning like if something has existed for a long period of time, it will likely exist also moving forward. Whether that's like an artistic medium or a technology or use case, like I kind of try to rely on like older mediums and to ground myself going forward, even though I like to work on new technology, but like let's take maybe gaussian splatting, that's very new. It likely won't be around for that much longer because it will be superseded by something newer and go backwards. But I choose it for like, let's say 20 years or 100 years, like it will just carry on. Yeah, I think try to ground yourself in something that really has existed for a long time and understand that there will be your versions of that, but maybe the fundamentals will remain the same. Kind of roll with the tools as they come along. Yeah, you do have to kind of think a little bit deeply about that and not tie yourself down to like one thing that's been invented in the last 5 or 10 months and get stuck to that.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of, find your niche, find something you're really passionate about. Tools, technology can be a way to kind of push your ideas and build something interesting. I think you talk a lot to, say successful game developers, especially in the indie scene. They're not building games for their audiences, they're building games for themselves. And so I think there's a lot of kind of wisdom there. It's that find something you're interested in, really kind of continue to push it. And, I think your audience will go up. There's more than one person interested in something. And it's my kind of general advice.
Grandfather, that one. I think the on second pricing points, because I have not done something that is going to work the whole time on, not on boards, and not suffering, and the point because it hurts. But it, to me, is focus on concepts, like the deep concepts. I remember interviewing students from wholesale, and that this took open was like can be in school. And they took the project to read it on some precedents. I would ask questions about color or about a basic some, let's say, the things they worked on. A lot of times, you can feel like what the fights to learn all of these new techniques and technologies that are shaking every day. We miss the basics. And once you have the basics, they actually was really comfortable in front of any technology that we follow you because, you know, at the end, if you understand a bit about statistical instruments and probability, you can then read a bit about element. Okay, I see kind of stuff. That makes you so much comfortable in navigating between all these different, papers like thousands every day and so on. And we learn first the deep concepts of things. And if you don't know, it's a really nice trip sometimes, especially now we're looking at it and sort of all questions on making asking why, but it's why is this or why is that? Then you go and until you get the notions of the bottom, and I think there was almost always stagnant with you. And then the second, we least is the application. Like, what am I doing it for? What are they needs? Everyone was working at Rachid on with that company. And I'm working a paper about lighting the time I'm moving some old generation shapers and so on. And there was so much vocabulary, displacement of maps and this, that, and the environment, blah, blah, blah. And there's all of this stuff. And I was trying to just say, okay, use your light, use your objects, use what you're trying to do. Let's understand that it's actually very basic operation and artists should understand to all the excited to do is get a certain look. And it doesn't, I go and tell them 100 features in my engine, but it doesn't matter to them. We're just trying to get this one thing to look a certain way. And even better, when we understand why the artist actually inspired to do that, it makes it so much easier to build with technology that they can use because you're like, oh, I know what you're trying to do. Here's a thing that has names and buttons and whatnot that are familiar to you. So you don't even have to have that load on your head that understand physical based rendering before you start actually looking at something that looks good. And to me, that makes you actually super powerful because you can go from, let's say, rendering from hyper realistic to not photoreal to this and that and the other without ever having to really expert all the equations that make the thing work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really important to make the base, and we still have something to change all the time. I have a prediction of 10 texts that I see at home in the last 10 years, changing the tools and everything. So yeah, learning the fundamentals of your crafts and understanding the creating intent and the cost one side of the interactive stories or games that. So let's take some questions from the audience. So my name is Toshi. I have a question about admission. So I took it really for a whole year and so we haven't seen anything that more impressive than exploring the dinosaurs. So is there anything based on the engineer, about detail, about development things, or your that's on visual?
Yeah, I guess I'll share my perspective a little. What I'm trying to say here, I think how dinosaur it's really saying that they have actually a lot of kind of subtle breaking narratives. And if you watch the talk they gave on it, I think right now we're seeing how they could approach of more really linear immersive storytelling. They have things like parkour or watched one where someone did like a underwater swimming downhill thing. It seems like I think the opportunity is there in 3D. I actually think it's potentially a little bit on like cost prohibitive. The fidelity that they were able to achieve with those models and the dinosaur muscle deformation techniques, you're not really seeing that replicated. And I think maybe they haven't seen the value in investing more. I think there are a couple storytelling immersive experiences. I think they're a little more kind of self-contained rather than like the large side sort of thing. But I think it's yeah, it is people think shy about spending the money or kind of investing in it. At least that's my thing.
Yeah, my name is Violet. I'm an indie XR game developer, and the question is, if you're like having talking about like future where like AI is when it helps like changing like the storytelling and developing it, I'd say I'm curious. I mean, it kind of a little bit started on the CGI, but the way do you think is like maybe some of the like first principles or like maybe parts of the development process that maybe is not prediction AI or that might maybe not be so affected by all these stuff with advanced things like house platform and AI or everything like what way you maybe sort of like skills or the first principles that might almost be like the conventional elements of the craft that might continue even amidst all these rapid changes in knowledge and some of that.
That's one simple one. It's critical thinking. Like you being able to evaluate the results of the AI is pretty likely that that's like the first basic one. You don't come just by yourself and like shape and just know design. That's what pretty watching around. Yeah, when you know we started random like pick like it's your best.
Think about simple on its humans on inches. So at the end, you make these things, it's ideals for other humans. Maybe at some point the AI can make something that's so predictive. Is it learn how the brain works and we can put all the things in the right place to get going? But at the end, I'm interested in like another human beings, what I'm telling them whenever storing of their art in general. And then I don't care what the AI has done because the thing is not interested in one it doesn't have an entity. It's a communication. So as long as humans are the same, you are the one to evaluate that output. None of the people that are looking at that stuff out that you see that was fantastic. It's done like automatically. Yeah, I put this prompt and here's the first private thing. I'm gonna put it. No, they all do their selection. They may not be artists themselves, but they still, whatever hits them the right way, okay, see the legal stuff it's done now is still to a human editing if you want. I think we're still getting to understanding what other people want and how to make it interesting for other people. We really done that too.
But what's the main nerve of the game was like, it's gameplay and like, is it fun? It's always like to be a most important like paints and Prometheus versus I mean, I think in a narrative was like maybe like level 2 and like level 1 for each to be always is it fun and it's still good? And that's a little changing. Maybe AI will help you prototype things more quickly to like figure out which of those ideas that you have might be fun, but it's always going to be super fundamental. Is it fun? Does it play well? You have to enjoy. We enjoy playing it. So
Get what completely. What?
I have a question about the words from John. Today, emotions and meetings answered. When we discuss about the VR and when we take potential applications, now we can get the chances, we get favors and the smell, and the progress in the audio with the spatial audio and higher quality the resolution audio can trigger reveals the function from that 5 years ago. My question is that the VR immersive experience, how do you see the future, the next 2 years? Was it this answer before? And how you trigger emotion? How you make somebody cry, love, touch appetites now. Sound is more for gaming. But when you see if you want to trigger the combination, the hospital for dentistry, want to win materials, fun, sensuality, emotions. I think that you have already the technology, but in the storytelling element, because you have always this geek culture of the gaming industry, I think we have come a gap where only in Hollywood they know that we need two dimensions, good character. My question is, well, we have been finished, and how is it in the next 2 years? Well, I would just recommend that like Earl, but for Asian Sale, upload the Spotlight Story series. But not that, because it's VR, it triggered emotions, but because it's good storytelling within a enhanced, let's say. I don't like that word that much. Like the fact that you are somewhat in the place and you are living sort of the story lives. We always talked about it. That was live cinema. You're in the moment. It's a very different thing. You're watching movie. Your brain processes it at neuroscientists, but your brain processes it differently. But I recommend there's other stories, of course, where you can we literally took the headset off so people crying. And I'm not saying that's because of tech. Nobody cares about the tech. We care. No one else cares. It's about it's the story. Stories have been emotional for a long time for people that know, and actually, in a way, our job is to enable them with interesting technology that you could use to, as I said, enhance flavor of somebody's film, but get out of the way and let them actually do their job. It's just getting us through, all those interesting emotions that we like, which are hard to just get the story. We talk about audio, which, once we don't touch on, but we always say that, visually it's like 180 at most, but audio is a 360. And audio is a lot more impactful in a way, but we don't think about it as much. And for all the projects that we did, and the sonic audio and more than the sonic, because there's a whole spectrum of what you can do with audio in VR that really enhances the experience. And you can, and I know actually, somebody working on a completely block project where you don't see anything, but it's all audio based. And you can have just as much of the strong effects on it. So, and other elements will also be available or usable, like you said, smell and so on, as long as you can get them to the point where an artist can use them properly. Like if I would say Asia Cell is one of the short stories we did where you are on a boat in the middle of the ocean. I remember going to this place in this VR theater in China where they use actually fans and so on to get air and spraying with this shit. If you are in an experience where you're already buying into the illusion, and you suddenly also get a bit of that being enhanced with other things, if it's done right, it's magical. And then so our job is, we are talking as a tech person, is to get those sensors all of the in a way that are understandable by some creator who knows if this is how you trigger it in the Slider controller and both playing with it to see what works best. And it's beautiful thing where
I'm just going to add to that. First, I did try Pearl. My mom did as well. We both tried. Very good experience. I recommend it. We're going to add on to that what you're kind of mentioning there in the end. If anyone had the chance to try out the Void experiments, rest in peace. I don't think it's around anymore, but they had some really interesting kind of matching of physical and digital. I was playing a Ghostbusters experience in the first room. You're just kind of in a living room. There's a chair, and you just ledge the chair and it matches one to one. This is the wood siding cushion. And then at the end of it, you're biting marshmallow man, and they're kind of, putting roasted marshmallows melts. And if it, there's a lot of these kind of little types of experiences that really immerse you at the next level. Where we're at today with the technology, I do think the kind of built-in spatialized audio systems, and this is really just what I'm playing at. I think the capture a whole other challenge. Then there's lots of technology challenges there, but the playback, I think, has a lot of possibilities. And I think when you think about mixed reality experiences, I think it is also an interesting storytelling medium where you can have, a physical person that has likeness and realism really in your own environment. And you can have spatialized audio that, sounds different if you're in a small bathroom versus a large audience, auditorium. So I think there are a lot of possibilities right now. I'm not seeing a ton as far as like really pushing the medium with mixed reality, but it feels like it's possible. I think that Encounter Dinosaurs is a great one if you get a chance to try that. Example with Rip.
Thank you. We are going to wrap up this panel. Thank you so much for 3 panelists. Great work. We welcome our next speaker,